All right. We are studying Sri Nisargadatta's I Am That. Uh, really was just a collection of Q&A with some of his disciples. And the current questioner is asking, is drawing has forced the conversation into a pitting of the world that an enlightened man or enlightened soul, enlightened person inhabits, and a world that an unenlightened person inhabits, and trying to and seeing them as two distinct things, which is probably a tendency of mind for us to look at our own world as being real and make comparisons with the other world. But it would be much more helpful for this questioner if he really understood that at the root that everybody's living in the same world. Well, no. Everybody's living in the same God, but inhabiting an individual mind. So the root is the same. The root is the divine. The root is that reality. Even in Advaita, it's referred to as God, but it's not anthropomorphized. It's not made into a personality or a person in history or in time and space. It's an ultimate reality that remains undescribable, remains without attribute. But it is what we live in. It is what we're experiencing. And so even though this conversation's going back and forth between that world and this world, understand that both worlds are a description of the same ultimate reality, but one from seeing it through pure mind, a mind that has no ideas of me and mine in it, actually a mind that's free of ideas. It's a mind that is just ever silent, so that all of the wisdom, the intelligence of being is spontaneously available to it and not referenced in it, but there, and the love. And so it's a world of spontaneity. It's a world that is manifested or observed from a perspective of no attachment, meaning there is no history in that world. And because there's no history, there's no need for a future, because our need for a future comes out of a history, right? Because the history in our world, in the world of unenlightened folks, our history is a collection of attachments. It's the things we didn't let flow through the moment. We grabbed them because we had a preference for them or a liking or an identity with them, and we decided to keep them. And so we wanted to share our immortality with them. And so we tucked them away in the next best thing, which is memory. And of course, that creates future, because that creates desire. And for desires to manifest, you need your future. So that's one of our quite often repeated little pieces of information, because it's quite helpful to understand that that's what's going on when we're running around this continually new, never repeating experience of a moment. So this questioner has been desperately wanting a bridge between his world and the enlightened world. And Sri Nisargadatta, of course, is infuriating him by telling him, well, there can't be a bridge because your world is imaginary. And so how do you draw a bridge from the real to the imaginary? There is no bridge. And he said, further, there's not a necessity for a bridge, because I am not in a different reality than you are in. We are all sharing a reality, but you have collected lots of things in your world, and I have collected nothing. And that's the primary difference. And so his last statement about Sri Nisargadatta's last statement is that I remain forever undefined. I am within and beyond, intimate and unapproachable, right? And that intimate and unapproachable is one of my favorite things, because that is what allows divine love. That's what allows an expression of an infinite, unbounded love. that impersonal, meaning not that he doesn't care and that he's aloof from you, but that there is no point in him that is relating to you. He is relating to you from a place that has uh, a circle with infinite centers, right? And why is that important, or what, if that even makes sense to you? Well, why is it important? Well, it's important because of the gopi girls. Remember that story in Krishna's life when they're dancing around the fire. This is one of my favorite things about the divine, about bhakti as a path, is that they were all dancing around that fire, and every single one of them, every single one of the gopi girls, was convinced that Krishna loved them the most. And the thing about this nature of the reality being intimate and unapproachable means that every single one of those gopis were in fact God's favorite. That was absolutely a true feeling, and it is the true feeling that all of us have and should have. It's as long as we understand the truth of it, that you being God's favorite does not diminish the feeling of favorite that the person next to you in the room has, because God has an infinite number of centers from which to express from. And so he's not limited to a singularity like we are. So it's when we fall in love with God, we're not falling in love with a circle that has a single center, and so the whole circle becomes defined by that center's relationship with you. We're in love with the center in a circle with an infinite radius, but with infinite numbers of centers as well. And so that is the nature of divine love. And it's one of the most beautiful things, and it just kind of gets hidden in two words here: intimate and unapproachable, which is very hard to understand when we think of it from our perspective, because the only way we could be unapproachable is to be aloof, to be unloving, because we only have one center, but not the case. So now the questioner is asking a very important question. Well, how did you come to it? How did you know this? He wants a process now, which is going to lead us into some fun places, because one of the infuriating things about Advaita is it's not a process. it's an isness that just has to be seen. And so he's going to talk about that. He says, this is how he did it: by my trust in my guru. This is his only answer: by my trust in my guru. He told me, you alone are, and I did not doubt him. I was merely puzzling over it until I realized that it is absolutely true. Now, oddly enough, this has been something I've been playing with for a few months now. This notion of, and this is a very experienceable line of thinking, which will take you some very, very interesting places. There is no one but you. That's the truth of the matter. Not you, this, okay? Go inside to the you that's watching your body and mind. Understand that that sense of I, that sense of being, is the only one in the universe. It is. There's not two. So it's not I and God. It's not I and my mind. It's not I and the person who's arguing with me in my mind, because there is only one without a second, and thou art that. So that sense of I within you that is watching mind, watching body, and is the fundamental of the illusion of I, the lower self, I, the body mind. By knowing and sitting there and contemplating the fact that there is not another one in the universe will lead you right straight down the path of truth. It will also give you an infinite amount of strength. And this is how I've been using it and how I've benefited the most from it in the last few months, is when I'm in myself, and in the Christian language, temptations arise, or the mind wants a desire or is focusing on a desire or something. When I go into discipline, when I go in and say, no, Normally, all my life, that's been an argument. My whole life, that's been an argument. It's like, no, you can't have that ninth piece of cake. And the child in me is like, uh, I'm ever free. What do you mean I can't have that ninth piece of cake? As one of its arguments. Or, but I like it. Why can't I have it? I'm not huge yet. Still got a few pieces of cake left. And that argument process takes two voices, right? And how many voices do all of us have going on in our head? That is Maya. That is duality. That is the root of duality. Because you have multiple yous within your own head, multiple instances of yourself running in your own head, due to not knowing who you are, due to not understanding that there is not another one in the world or universe except that one isness within you, that until you return to that self, until you return to a singularity in the mind, which means there's no one to argue, there's nothing to think about, because thinking also takes duality. When you think, you have to have a listener and you have to have a speaker going on. And so even then you've become two, right? And so pure mind that Ramakrishna talks about when he says pure mind and Brahman, or pure mind and that ultimate reality, are one. He means a pure mind that has no me and mine in it, so it's not disturbed. Without that particular me and mine, you've just got that singularity, that one without a second, a knowledge that there is no one else. Let me just check here, make sure nobody's trying to get in. Okay. And that means you have a single voice. And if you've got a single voice, it need not speak. Right? This is the funny thing. It was quite a funny realization for me. And it's pretty recent, where I was just thinking about, I was thinking, actually, like I often do. And this is something all of us do. And sometimes we get lost in it because we go levels and levels and we consider it real. And so we get lost in our thinking. And then it occurred to me, it was like, well, who's the voice in my thinking? Oh, well, of course, that's me. And then that begs the question, well, who's listening to it? Well, that's also me. And then it occurred to me, I thought, well, that's an absurd situation. Me talking to me. What is me going to tell me that me doesn't already know? How's that going to happen? And so this understanding led to a much quieter mind. I was like, you only think in that sense, in that method, as a means of distraction, as a means of entertainment, to kind of talk about things you already know, and maybe rearrange some of the contents of mind, which gives us the illusion that it's actually teaching us something, because the contents of mind get modified, the relationships between mental objects gets modified, but the sum total of the knowledge remains the same, right? And the knowledge that we're looking for actually is not of that relational type. We're not looking for a knowledge of objects with relationships to other objects, or thoughts with relationships to other thoughts, because one without a second is not relational. So, gosh, we've gone all the way into that from this. So how did he come to that knowledge? He says, by my trust in my guru. He says, you alone are. So that's the point. There is one. There's one. And the one in you is the one in me. And we are all that same one. But for that to be true, that one has to drop the attributes that we've falsely assigned to it. That one is 60 years old, or that one is male or female, that one has a nationality, that one has relationships with other people. We have to let go of all of that in order to see the truth of this one without a second. And that will not be something we have to learn. That will be something that will be apparent when the mind stops entertaining us, stops distracting us, when we stop being pulled into the world of change, which is what the mind is. The mind is the only thing that changes. The flow of thought is what changes. And the rate of that flow of thought is your sense of time. And so when the mind stills, you become aware of being an immortal eternal. You become aware of being one without a second. You become aware of your bliss as your nature, the joy of this existence, the joy of Satchitananda, right? The nature of that one without a second, which is beyond that nature, but that's the only handle we can put on it. Otherwise, we can't pick it up and talk about it. So the most mature opinion of God that we can have is Satchitananda, that love absolute, that wisdom absolute, that existence absolute. That is the highest projection we can put on the divine. But it will really, the way I see that is when you fall into that infinite love, when you drop the body and you're just falling into eternity and infinity, the last three words that you'll be able to yell out about your experience will be love, wisdom, existence. And then that too is transcended into something. Well, I won't even make up a sentence for that. It'll be beyond that. All right. So I trusted my guru. He told me that I alone am, that there's only one. And I didn't doubt him. I didn't go get a second opinion. I didn't change religions. I listened to him. I was merely puzzling over it, right? You just said that's exactly, puzzling's a great word, because that's what you do on a puzzle, right? You match two pieces and then you just kind of keep looking and sorting through the other ones to find matching colors and whatnot, because you have a faith that, yes, this puzzle makes a single picture out of thousands of pieces. So he goes along and he's doing that just by the words that his guru has told him, that you alone are. So this is the method. This is the method. It's just pondering the truth with the assumption, and that's what faith is. Faith is hearing something that you can't prove in your current state, but that it tastes true. You're pretty sure it's true. And this one is rooted in a guru, rooted in a someone who knows. So that faith leads you to ponder it. And then slowly, as you look around at all your experiences and you start watching your experiences, you start becoming aware of that inner world, the puzzle begins to come together. And this is how he got there. This is how he came to it. So he says, you alone are. I did not doubt him. I was merely puzzling over it until I realized that it is absolutely true. Right? So there is realization taken out of its religious context and just put in its matter-of-fact context. I realized it was absolutely true, what I was told. And that is realization. It's not a magical flash of wonder and, colors in the sky. It's just coming to the realization. Wow, this is true. This, finally, I understand. This is what is. And so the questioner says, conviction by repetition? Maharaj answers, by self-realization, not by repetition, because you see in the world that he's inhabiting, there is no repetition because there's no history. There just is isness, right? And he has simply removed his attachments to any condition, removed his attachments to any limiting adjuncts, right? Like Swami Vivekananda says about us. This personality that you love so much in yourself is just a collection of limitations and restrictions, right? That's all it is. It's nothing more than that. Just a random, literally random collection of limitations and restrictions. And things that you've defined yourself as, which is bondage, because by being one thing, you can't be anything else. Right? So by self-realization, I found that I am conscious and happy absolutely. And only by mistake, I thought I owed being, consciousness, bliss to the body and to the world of bodies. Right? So what's he saying there? He's saying what he said before in a very different way. I identified myself from the inside out as opposed from the outside in. That's what happened. His sense of self came from the inside out instead of the outside in. So it would be very difficult for Sri Nisargadatta to write his dating app, to write his dating uh, bio, right? Because start describing yourself from the inside out and you run out of attributes immediately. What's there to say? What are the boundaries, right? On your inner world, what are the boundaries? Where is the geolocation? Where is the mind? Where is the voice of the mind? Where is it coming from? Is it inside you or are you inside it? You can't tell. That incidentally is another experiment I was doing the other day. I was, in Vivekananda, because Vivekananda says something very interesting about that when he makes that statement. I am not in Alameda. Alameda is in me. That city in the Bay Area. We take that a lot, and we hear that all the time. Actually, it's one of the statements that gets tossed around quite a bit. And I realized it's one of the many that I kind of created an intellectual understanding of up here to say, oh yeah, I get it. And yet I didn't understand it at all, because it's led to a new way of thinking that's still developing. I was working on it even this morning as I was literally as I was stirring my coffee. I was reminding myself that all of this is happening within me. I'm not in New Mexico. I'm not in a house. I'm not making an external cup of coffee. This is all happening within me. I surround all of this. And there's a very different mood that comes over the mind with that understanding. Yesterday when I was on the plane and I had this rather heavy gentleman who hopefully doesn't tune into this, this rather heavy, portly gentleman from Illinois, a wonderful person, a farmer of farmers. And he had those big, bare hands that just were calloused on top of calluses. And he kept, the plane seat, no fault of his, was just too small for him. And by my great fortune, I was in the middle seat. And so I was constantly taking his elbow to my rib, because his remote control for the screen in front of him, he had to lift this giant arm back and push that button halfway back on his thing. And, I was sitting where his elbow needed to be. And that didn't bother him. that didn't occur to him for the entire flight. So I was constantly just, and so I was really working on remembering all of this is happening inside of me. There's only one in this universe. There are not two, and trying to keep my sense of self off of the body and off of the mind so that I wouldn't get irritated, which is what happens when we think wrongly. And so trying to stay in that center of truth. And it works. It really does. It really works. It's like these things just don't build up in you. So he's talking about that. He says, I found that I'm conscious and happy, absolutely. He found that that's his nature, that if you remove all of the noise of mind and sit in the awareness of one without a second, that you are everything and that everything around you is within you, who is there to disturb who? Who is there to annoy who? And who is there to be annoyed? These are the questions. And so you pull the rug out from all of your bad habits, all of your wrong thinking. So by self-realization, I found that I am conscious and happy, absolutely. And only by mistake, I thought I owed being, consciousness, bliss to the body and to the world of bodies. And it's interesting that he puts those two together, to the body and the world of bodies. Because if you have your sense of yourself as a body, then you live in a world of bodies, right? You live in a world of multiplicity. If you have an idea of yourself as being the jar within which all of this is contained, there's no other jar. And everybody shares your sense of you, which oddly, and maybe the ultimate selfishness, makes them less bothersome. You're not as annoyed by something you perceive as being a part of you as you are by something that you don't perceive as a part of you. And so I was practicing this earlier in the week, and I just share this for fun, really, because maybe this will be helpful, maybe not. But as I was thinking about what is it that makes me feel like I'm in the world instead of the world being in me? And I really realized, for me, it's sight. The eyes are the most convincing to me that I live in the world. Now, that's only when you take it at surface value, because when you go into a dream, you're seeing, and you're seeing in a world that has no sun. You're seeing in a world that has no electricity. You're seeing in a world that has no source of light at all. So, how are you seeing in your dream? What is the light of day in your dream? And that light of day is what Vivekananda tells us is the light of this day. It's the light of consciousness. It is the light of awareness, which, of course, Eckhart Tolle says is love itself. And so the light that we assign to the sun and to light bulbs, we assign them to those same things in the dream. And yet the reality of it, it is the light of consciousness. So that helps to bring it inside when you understand. But what I did was close my eyes, and I was brushing my teeth at the time. And I thought, okay, where is this sensation of brushing my teeth? And I realized, that I'm experiencing that internally. It's only when I opened my eyes and looked at the reflection in the mirror that brushing my teeth became an external experience for me. And so I kept my eyes closed and I saw this inside of me. And then I stopped brushing my teeth and just stood there for a moment thinking, okay, well, where is my body? And I realized as long as my eyes were closed, that all of the sensations of self came inside, that they were all within me. Now, oddly enough, we've already talked about this because we've had this conversation several times, but I'll be boring enough to repeat it again. The notion that we don't have any indication or any evidence of an external world, right? We don't know that there's anything out there. And actually, Sri Nisargadatta, in a place we haven't read yet, says that there is no external. There is only internal. And quite a fascinating thing. So this is what he found. He said it was only by mistake that I assigned the world and myself externally. And that the truth of the matter is that I experience everything internally. And in addition to that, the only thing I experience is the moment. And if I remove memory from the moment, remove history from the moment, in the moment itself, there's no change. There's just isness, right? So now the questioner says, you are not a learned man. Meaning in the classical sense, right? He hasn't been arranging objects of thought in his mind and drawing relationships between them. That's what he's saying. You're not a learned man. You have not read much, and what you read or heard did perhaps not contradict itself. I am fairly well educated, and I have read a lot, and I have found that books and teachers contradict each other hopelessly. Hence, whatever I read or hear, I take it in a state of doubt. It may be so, it may not be so. That is my first reaction. As my mind is unable to decide what is true and what is not, I am left high and dry with my doubts. In yoga, a doubting mind is a tremendous disadvantage. There's many things in that statement that are a big disadvantage. But let's hear what Maharaj says about it. I'm glad to hear it. But my guru, too, taught me to doubt everything and absolutely. He said, deny existence to everything except yourself. Through desire, you have created the world with its pains and pleasures, right? Because through the denial of yourself, of your one without of a second, that created a world, an external world of change, right? and you placed yourself in that world. And so you had to go to that world for what you perceived to be your needs or your desires. You see how that one mistake flip-flops into a huge set of implications, right? And so he says the cure to this is deny the existence of everything out there. If you understand that the world is like a dream, then you'll stop trying to build castles in it for the sake of having a castle anyway. You may still do it for the fun and exercise of building a castle or creating something beautiful or manifesting an aspect of your divine nature. Do something for love, which is what karma yoga is all about. It's changing the reason that you build, that you do, that you act. It takes the reason away from the result and puts the reason on an emanation of your nature, an inspiration of your being, so that everything that you do is done through inspiration and not through a grabbing or a getting. So that's the difference. So it's interesting. He says, I have the ultimate doubt, but I decided not to doubt my existence, right? You can do that. You can come to that place too. I remember this is an experiment I did, I don't know, 2006, I think it was. I make these dates up, I have to confess. But I was sitting in the shrine in San Francisco, and it occurred to me also in my mind that I knew a lot of things and that it was sort of getting in the way. And I thought, well, I wonder what is one thing that I know that doesn't depend on anything else that I know. I sat there for a couple of hours trying to find what is the one thing that I know that's not dependent on anything else that I know. And I finally arrived actually a little bit beyond Descartes because I realized I am. That's the one thing that I know that doesn't depend on anything else that I know. I am. Right? Now I missed Descartes' target because I didn't describe that to thinking. I just described it to being. So I didn't say I think, therefore I am. That's a dependency. I wanted the thing that had no dependency, and that was just I am. And ironically, that's what this entire book is about that we're reading. So he says, deny existence to everything but yourself. Now, this self, this is where you need some caution, because you have to know what self, who you are, in order to do this properly, right? And actually, the exercise, if it's done with earnestness and sincerity, which is why Thakur says that's the most important thing in spiritual life, you'll come to realize that he's not talking about your particular self, your self bounded by egoism, bounded by a set of attributes, that he's talking about this self that you are when everything is silent, what you are when nothing is telling you what you are. No thought, no experience, no body, no future, no past. The I that arises, that becomes apparent to you only in silence, only in the absence of thinking, in the absence of experiencing, in the absence of the senses. Who is it that is there? But through desire, you've created a world with its pains and pleasures. Questioner, must it be also painful? Maharaj, what else? By its very nature, pleasure is limited and transitory. Out of pain, desire is born. In pain, it seeks fulfillment, and it ends in the pain of frustration and despair. Pain is the background of pleasure. All seeking of pleasure is born in pain and ends in pain. Right? This is another one of those things to contemplate, because we're all sitting there with all of our fingers crossed right now thinking, God, I hope that's not true. What a drag, what a pessimistic way to view life. But this is why they differentiate bliss from happiness, right? Because bliss is a deep sense of contentment. It's not an excited sense of exhilaration. It's an isness, and it's unchanging. It doesn't go anywhere. It's the 0 point. So that's the reality, but it's not a pleasure, because it's not above the 0 point, and it's not a negative thing because it's not below the 0 point. Bliss is that deep contentment of knowing one without a second, and knowing that all is as it should be, and that it's all within you. So pleasure, by its very nature, it's limited and transitory, right? Which is what keeps us running. That's why this world will never be fulfilling. It simply can't be. Every desire that you get here dissolves. It ends. It has an expiration date on it, no matter what it is. Every single thing that you grab in this world from desire is going to go away and leave you without it again. And so if you have pleasure in owning that thing, it's just a matter of time until you experience the suffering of no longer owning it or no longer having it. And this is the very source of renunciation. This knowledge is the very root of how we renounce. And you should not renounce until you've done that discernment, so that your renunciation is true. You let go of a thing because you see that it has no value to you. You see that it has, that in light of what you already have, it has no value to you, right? And so you renounce, you let go, and you don't pay attention to it anymore. So renunciation isn't about the letting go. It's about the realization of what you have. All right, so pain is the background of pleasure. All seeking, right? Because to seek pleasure, you have to assume that you don't have any, right? You can't want something that you have. You only want things, well, that's not true in that sense, but you only go looking for things that you don't already have, right? And so that's why he makes that statement that we read quite a few weeks earlier, where Nisargadatta says, do you not understand it is your quest for happiness itself that makes you unhappy? And how is that true? Because you have to assume unhappiness in order to go looking for happiness, right? And the only way that you can assume that unhappiness is to forget who you are, to forget the moment, to not be present in the moment, but to be present in your past or your future, right? You say, well, how is that possible? Well, you define the moment from your past experience. That causes you to see the moment as lacking the things you once enjoyed, right? So then you begin living in the future, which means making plans and running after means of getting the things that your past has shown you do not exist in your present. And so if you live in the future, it's an experience of anxiety. If you live in the past, it's the experience of regret, right? Because it's things that are no longer. So that loses that sense of loss, that sense of regret. Oh, I'm sorry that's gone. I'm sorry that's not here anymore. And the future, the anxiety, since it's completely made up and unstable, and you've placed your existence in it, you're terribly nervous about how it's going to turn out all the time. Always have your fingers crossed. So all seeking of pleasure is born in pain and ends in pain. The questioner, all you say is clear to me. I laugh because this is such the experience of life. You know, I worked in an accounting office with 23 people, and I was the tech support guy, the tech engineer there. And every time something would happen on somebody's computer, or we get locked up, or they couldn't get something, of course, for a tech person, the first thing I would always have to ask is, what were you doing? What did you do? And I tell you, the only answer I ever got to that question was, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. And this man here, all you say is clear to me. When he just outlined in that wonderful paragraph we read 2 questions ago, I'm an educated man, and I, this, and I have that, and I've done this and this and that. And now he's saying all this is clear to me. It's like, dude, You wouldn't even be asking these questions if these things were clear to you. And so this is a matter of why truth is also one of the top three most important things, according to all the world's religions, right? This sense of honesty. You have to be where you are. You can't drum up a sense of self in the moment that defines you as enlightened and then work from there. It doesn't work like that. But see, that's the problem with living in mind. Our sense of ourself is always changing. There is no stability there. At one moment, we're content. The next moment, we're hungry or unhappy. And we are constantly working from this ever-changing moment, which is why we're never satisfied. Because we satisfy the mind in one aspect, and it comes up with 19 other ones that change that reality. And so we're on a moving target, shooting at moving targets with a moving gun, and it's very, very difficult. So the questioner says, all you say is clear to me, but when some physical or mental trouble comes, my mind goes dull and gray or seeks frantically for relief, right? Because we're identified with it. When the mind comes up with a mood, instead of realizing that we're looking through a mind that has a mood, our immediate tendency is to say, I'm in a mood. We attach ourselves to it. We attach ourselves to the feeling of the mind. And now we've got to fix it. And good luck with that. Right? And the Maharaj says the perfect thing here. He says, what does it matter? Right? Because what's at the root of saying it doesn't matter? Does that actually mean the things contained in it don't matter? Not necessarily. What it's saying is it has nothing to do with you. The condition of your mind has nothing to do with you. The condition of your body has nothing to do with you. Right? You are the dreamer, asleep in the bed. So what that the mind has come up with 5 juvenile delinquents that are chasing you down a street in New York? What difference does it make? You're dreaming. You're safe in bed. You're sound asleep. You're content. You're perfectly fine. What does it matter? It is the mind that is dull or restless, not you. Look, all kinds of things happen in this room. Do I cause them to happen? They just happen. So it is with you. The role of destiny unfolds itself and actualizes the inevitable. You cannot change the course of events, but you can change your attitude. And what really matters is the attitude and not the bare event. Right? So that's why one of the beautiful things that Vivekananda says, it's not what you do in this world that's going to bring you contentment. It's how you do it. Right? And that is the fundamental one-sentence description of karma yoga. It's not what you're doing. You can work in a cubicle and have a fulfilling life. You can flip hamburgers and have a fulfilling life. You can wait tables. You can be president. All those things can be fulfilling. It's not what you're doing. It's how you're doing it. If you're doing it in accordance with your nature, which means you're doing it because of love, you're doing it because of wisdom. And obviously you're doing it in existence or being, but you're staying in being. You're staying in the moment, you're being, you're not imagining. If you work like that, mopping the floor can be an ecstatic experience. No kidding. If you're doing it like that, cleaning out the dishwasher can be an ecstatic experience. Look at Ramakrishna. What caused his ecstasies? His own divine self, his own being caused his ecstasies. Usually it was something in the realm of the senses that reminded him, that sang the name of God to him in his ear for a moment, and he forgot everything, and forgot all of the stories of everything anyway, and saw it as it was for a split second, and it short-circuited body and mind. He returned to the self. What does it matter? It is the mind that is dull or restless, not you. Look, all kinds of things happen in this room. Do I cause them to happen? You only come to this knowledge by practicing awareness, by you really being present. Because that my age-old story, and I'm sorry that I just keep using the stories. Someday I'll write new ones, but that story where I planned in high school to have dinner at Caro or go to the movies. I always give different names, but Jane and John. I plan on going to the movies on Friday night with Jane and John, but Friday night comes and I end up at Caro's restaurant with Dick and Nancy. I will still tell you that I planned my weekend, right? I will still say that I was the one responsible for that. But what happens? Life gives us what it gives us, and we modify the story as we go to keep ourselves in the illusion that we're in charge, that we're making things happen. When you look at the number of variables that are necessary for any particular thing to occur, and then you look at how many of those variables you actually control, you have no other conclusion but knowing that you are not the doer. There simply is no other way to explain it. So that is what Maya is. Maya is the story that your mind is constantly weaving to convince you that you are in control, that you are separate and apart from the whole, and that you are running your life, right? That you've got free will. Gosh darn it. So do I cause them to happen? No, they just happen. Right now, Ramakrishna gives a little bit of a modification to this. He says you're like a goat tied to a rope. And so, your rope is 10 feet long. So yeah, you could move anywhere in that 10-foot radius according to will. But the vast rest of the earth is not your domain. You don't control all of that. And so he gives that, but even that dissolves in realization, because all he's really saying there is, yes, you can seemingly control a certain number of attributes or variables, but that number of variables in the big picture is pretty meaningless. It's just enough to keep you in the delusion that you're running your life. You cannot change the course of events, but you can change your attitude. And what really matters is the attitude and not the bare event. The world is the abode of desire and fear, right? That is what creates this world, the world of the senses. You cannot find peace in it. You can't. For peace, you must go beyond. Go beyond the world. The root cause of the world is self-love. Because of it, we seek pleasure and avoid pain. Replace self-love by love of the self, and the picture changes. Brahma, the creator, is the sum total of all desires. The world is the instrument for their fulfillment. Souls take whatever pleasure they desire and pay for them in tears. Time squares all accounts. The law of balance reigns supreme. Wow. There's a lot to unpack in there. But it's changing the center of your world, right? From what? We've talked about it at the very beginning. It's changing your center from having one center, which is me and mine, to a center that is infinite. It's in everything. It's not about this particular me and mine. You become identified with the self in all. And then your concern expands and your ego diminishes. And consequently, and I challenge you to find it out, your suffering diminishes. Your desire diminishes. Your being annoyed by others diminishes. Your road rage dissolves, right? So just this one trick right there, right? The root cause of the world is self-love. That's the love of the particular. Change it to love of self. Love of self, that particular which is in everybody. So it's not particular. It's that self that takes on the attributes of the mind and body that then becomes particular. But in its nature is all pervasive, everywhere present. And you think, oh my God, how's that possible? And once again, I do my boring talk about dreams. Look at the dream. In that dream, you are everything that you see in that dream equally. All of it is your own mind stuff, your very own self. You created and are creating it in real time, which is amazing. But in real time, everything in that dream is created by you, in you, of you. There are no mountains. There is no ocean. There are no juvenile delinquents chasing you through New York. It's all you. And so if in that dream you become aware that you are dreaming and that all of this is you, where is fear? Where is the need to run? Where is death? Where is suffering? What is real? The real is the experiencer of the dream alone, right? All the rest is a dance, a play. All right. So replace self-love by the love of the self, and the picture will change. Become aware that you're dreaming. Become aware that it's all you, and love that you that is in everything. Be fascinated by the dream as you, and all the fear goes away, right? And what created it? Brahma, the creator. What is the what actually created the world that we live in at this moment? The sum total of all desires, right? What created Albuquerque outside my window here? The sum total of the desires of the people living there. We put the park here, we put this street here. We decided to put a light at the top of that mountain. The sum total of desires is what creates our moment. So Brahma, the creator, is the sum total of all desires, which is what this moment is for you. So if you're not happy in this moment, toss your desires, or at least change them. The value of changing them is only coming to realize that it's not a matter of which desires you choose that make you happy or unhappy. It's the fact that you've got to chuck all desires in order to find your happiness, to find your bliss. And that bliss requires you to do nothing. You don't have to do anything. In silence, it arises. In peace, it becomes apparent. In stillness, it becomes obvious. The world is the instrument for their fulfillment, right? So the reason that we're in this world, the reason we've created this world, the reason that we're in this dream is to find the things we think we need to find, to run from the things we think we need to run from, to figure it out, to exhaust ourselves until we sit down and start really thinking. In the dream, you really have to go inside to find the dreamer. If you stay in the dream, you stay in the dream. All those things affect you. But go inside and find that silent sleeper who's not expressing himself, who's not calling your attention to him, but who is nonetheless. It's only by letting go of the dream that you find the dreamer. The world is the instrument of their fulfillment. Souls take whatever pleasure they desire, right? You can certainly go and get what you want in this world, whatever it is. There's plenty of restaurants and bars and beaches out there. Go have at it. As long as your bathing suit fits. Play for them, but you pay for them in tears, right? You pay for them in tears. This is one of the most frustrating things. You work how many days a year for well, I'm talking to mostly people who don't work anymore, but nonetheless, think of those vacations. Remember those 2-week vacations you used to take? You'd spend 50 weeks a year planning those 2 weeks vacation. And then during your vacation, what are you actually doing? You're sitting there counting the number of days you have left. That's what a vacation is. Counting the days you've got left before you have to get back to the 50 weeks of planning the next one, right? So this is the world. We pay for our pleasures in tears. Time squares all accounts, right? Time passing squares all the accounts. All these things sum up and ultimately lead to realization, which is why he can say something like this. All paths lead to the divine. All paths lead to realization, to the ultimate reality. The law of balance reigns supreme. So you can bounce back and forth any number of times, but ultimately, Each time you bounce a little bit less far away from center, and ultimately all of us will come to the peace of the center, to the quiet of mind, and we'll realize the dream, and we'll be free, and we'll find the inherent bliss, ecstatic bliss of being. All right, it's 10. Look at that. Amazing. Well, you guys have probably been begging for it. But that happened quite quickly for me. All right. Let me stop the recorder here.